About 5 months ago, I decided to take the back roads to Glasgow instead of the motorway. I had my sat-nav and all was fine until I got to Barghetti, and the road ahead is closed, so my sat-nav configures another route. It takes me on this really narrow, creepy road with rubbish, spare tires, and glass all over the road. I swear I was lucky not to have 4 flat tires. Something didn't feel right, but as I didn't know the area, I continued on and around the corner. There was even more rubbish and broken glass. I'm thinking, what kind of road is this? I decide to stop to put another route into my sat-nav, and when I look up, there's a guy running towards my car with this maniac look on his face. I swear I nearly died on the spot, but managed to turn the car around and get out of there as fast as possible. Note to self, never take back roads again. Naturally, I'm a follower of horror and this subreddit and similar subreddits. I posted one on my Reddit a few months ago, so here's another one. When I was younger, every year for Christmas, I would drive upstate to my aunt's house along a stretch of highway. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of this road. All I know is it runs nearby Akron, New York at some point. However, most of the drive is through rural areas with little to no towns nearby. So it was the dead of night, and my groggy self had gotten off of a long shift and had to drag my ass to my aunt's house, since my extended family was expecting me the following morning. Near halfway through the drive, I realized I was low on gas, which irritated me. My brother told me he had filled it up the day before, so he either forgot or he was straight lying. I saw an archaic-looking sign for a gas station off the next road. It wasn't an official road sign. Literally a pole with a slab of metal attached with "gas off next exit," or something along those lines painted on it. That seemed a little sketchy, but people do the same thing with fruit stands on highways, so whatever. I pulled off the next exit on some dilapidated country-ass road through dense woods. The whole thing was creepy and surreal. I kept expecting Leatherface to come running out of the trees with a chainsaw. Anyways, eventually I came to the gas station and realized quickly it hadn't been open for years. It was all rusted and the convenience store's roof was caving in. The gas pumps had all been taken out as well. I pulled over next to it and checked my gauge. I would probably only make it another half mile before running out. So I called AAA and they said they'd send a truck over. Now I played the waiting game. I left my engine on because when the headlights were off, everything was pitch black, and my paranoid self wasn't sitting next to an abandoned gas station in the middle of a forest in complete darkness. So most of the wait went uneventful until I sensed movement around the side of the old store where my lights are pointed. I look up but didn't see anything more, so I looked back down at my phone. Then over the sounds of the night, I hear someone yell, "Hey buddy, come here," in a demanding tone. I look up and I shit you not, there's a dude standing by the old store looking towards me, illuminated by my headlights. He looked like a run-of-the-mill homeless guy. I was honestly spooked and figured he must have been squatting there. Still watching him, I rolled down my window and yelled something like, "Yeah, what's up?" Still mentally crapping myself. I had my foot ready to floor it out of there at the first sign of trouble. "You got any change?" "Nah, sorry, I don't, man." I look up at him, and he has this kind of vacant expression and is standing stiff. Then I see more movement. There are heads, about 20 or so heads, peeking around trees beyond the man I'm talking to. I can't see them clearly at all, but they are definitely people. Literally just heads staring in my direction from around the trees. I see another guy beginning to walk from around the gas station, and then I turned around and sped off. I got as far away from that place as my tank could carry me and updated AAA on my location. The driver came back over and filled me up, and I didn't say anything. But after he left, I wanted to call the cops, so I called the nearest town's sheriff department. They said they'd send a trooper over and I gave them the location. When I got to my aunt's house, they called me back and said whoever was there was gone, but they could tell a large number of people had been living there for a while. Blankets, canned food, the usual. The whole situation still freaks me out. But frankly, I can consider myself lucky I'll always have such a creepy story to tell. I'm just glad nothing bad happened. Yeah, and to the creepy dudes at that gas station, let's not meet. This just happened a few days ago. I live with my parents in a small town in a rather rural area. My dad is into astronomy, and he wanted to take my mom and me to watch the stars with him at around 11 p.m. I like night walks, and I felt safe because there usually aren't any people around in my street at night, and my parents were with me, so I decided to walk maybe 50 meters ahead of them to enjoy the silence at night. My dad told me to go to a nearby field. For that, I had to leave the town, and with that, the streets with lights. When I first entered the dark area, I immediately sensed that something was wrong. I had a very bad gut feeling. I looked around and saw nothing because it was too dark, so I headed back towards the streetlights and waited for my parents to arrive. We went back to the dark area, and soon I saw a man walking towards us. It was completely dark, but when he was about 2 meters away, he pulled out a flashlight and he aimed it directly at our faces so we couldn't see anything. It was weird, but we didn't think much of it. For a better sight of the night sky, we went to a path far away from the main road, but you could still see the road where we met the guy. Suddenly, he turned on his flashlight again and directed it at us again, even though we were about 50 meters away now. I saw him turning around and walking towards us once more before he turned off the flashlight. Soon after, I heard him approaching us on that small path we were on and told my dad I wanted to leave. We started walking back and I heard the guy turning around too. He walked in front of us the entire way back to town. When we reached our house, we saw another similar looking guy walking in the other direction. Essentially, nothing bad happened, but my mom and me both had a really bad gut feeling, and the fact that there's a series of burglaries going on in our street doesn't make it much better. I lived in a large house off the Appalachian Trail some time ago, in a small town that offered hikers a place to stay. They had an indoor hostel and allowed the yard to be used for tents. Coming off the trail, the church was another block away or so, and our property went nearly right up to the backyard and driveway of the church. So we would sometimes allow the hikers to pass through our yard and cut down time. We were very friendly with strangers since we were always out on the porch practicing or in the yard working as a family unit, and we had 3 reliable boxers. Now to the eerie bits. One particular time, a man came down the hill alone, and the road ran along our fence. We had a deep lot. I was a safe distance the entire time. If I remember correctly, I was alone playing with the dogs. He asked for directions or something, and I noticed my dogs get in front of me in a protective and cautious way. Not their normal, welcoming wiggles other groups of hikers and pairs that traveled by before would get. One was growling, which was crazy unusual. I only got unsettled when I understood my dogs did not like this man. I told him the normal directions and mentioned out of the normal courtesy and obligation that I could cut him some time, but I had to ask my parents, or specifically my dad, first. I ran into the cellar and said a man wanted to walk through the yard and the dogs didn't like him. They came out and were all mountain friendly. "Sorry friend, I have a project going on back there blocking the way. You'll have to walk around the block." He accepted it, but he didn't seem bothered or fazed at all. Later that night, the same hiker tried to stab and or mug another hiker at the church with a knife. I can't explain what I saw on the trail one summer evening. This experience happened to me when I was 14 years old. I hadn't spoken to anyone about the event since it happened, not even my significant other. I'm 20 years old now, about to double major with my first 2 degrees in psychology and anthropology. Recently, for reasons unknown to me, the memories of this strange happening have resurfaced and are continuing to plague my waking thoughts, as well as my unconscious and subconscious. As we are taught in psychology, talking about the situation could help with repressed trauma, so here it goes. I live in the high desert mountains of Southern California, situated just below the Sierra Nevadas, about 30 minutes west of Mojave. My town is no booming metropolis. At the time, our largest market was a Kmart, one of the last still in business, I might add, and we only had 4 stoplights in town. This takes place in the subsection of the town about 13 miles from the shops, banks, and restaurants in a small community largely inhabited by retirees. It's smack dab in the middle of summer, and the temperatures were well in the high 90s to low 100s. My nightly routine would consist of walking my Australian Shepherd. However, I would wait until it was almost dark to avoid the heat. I grabbed my phone, a small pocket knife, some headphones, my pup, and set out for my nightly walk. My community is also home to a significant amount of equestrian riders, as well as cattle ranchers. The trails I walked were designated horse riding trails set between pastures. That night, I had decided to take the horse trail that stretches for approximately 2 miles between back-to-back paddocks. It's basically a long, narrow trail that's between very large backyards. My ending destination was the Equestrian Center, a communal equestrian park where all types of horse riders can enjoy various activities on their horses. Making my way through the sandy terrain of the trail, it was nearly dark now. The sky was becoming a deeper shade of blue every time I looked up, and my dog was becoming harder to see. I estimated my arrival at the Equestrian Center to be around 15 minutes from my current position, so I sent a text to my mother. "I'll be at the Equestrian Center in about 15 minutes. Could you meet me there? I'm too tired to walk back." My mother had replied, "Sure, I'll leave in 10 minutes. Now at this point, I was just outside the east entrance of the Equestrian Center, where the Enchanted Forest Trail connects to the straight trail I was on, sort of like a 3-way intersection. You can either go left into the Enchanted Forest Trail, or go straight into the Equestrian Center. Before I reached the intersection of the trails, I noticed a shift in my dog's behavior as she becomes anxious and seemingly worried. She had her eyes fixated to the forest and stopped dead in her tracks. I played it off as another animal within the forest like a bobcat or boar, as they weren't uncommon in my area. I gave her a slight tug on her collar, although she was still insistently focused on the forest. With a little more convincing, I was able to get her moving forward, pushing on towards to Equestrian Center where my mother would be waiting for our arrival. Now it was nearly pitch black, with only the moon guiding me with its low light. There was just the slightest of visibility, forcing me to turn on my cell phone's dim flashlight. Entering the Equestrian Center now, I noticed something that startled me immensely. A very tall person, a man about 10 to 15 feet into the Enchanted Forest Trail, with his back towards me standing completely still, his head facing the sky and his hands open, palms pointing in front of him, while his arms are at his side. He was tall, approximately 6 feet, slim build, short dark hair, was wearing what looked to be a light blue scrubs or at least a very thin blue napkin-like material, and was barefoot. What startled me the most was his demeanor and what he was doing. His stance was enough to scare anyone in that setting, but as I approached him slowly, it appeared to me he was shaking, vibrating or slightly convulsing, but doing so while standing up. It didn't seem like he had any control over it, although he retained his balance perfectly. Scared and not entirely sure what to do, I said, "Hello? Excuse me." I paused momentarily and raised my voice slightly with the next question. "Is everything all right?" When I said that, he stops shaking altogether, but still doesn't turn around or move another muscle. He just remains in that same creepy position and doesn't even move. For a brief moment, I had thought I might have been imagining this. I glanced down at my dog, and she was also concerned with the state and condition of this man, and began growling quietly. Then I knew it wasn't all in my head. When I looked back up, he had moved closer to me, about 7 feet closer, now almost on my trail's path. I had only looked at my dog for a split second, and he did it without making a sound. He still wasn't facing me either, and his hands were still open, head still facing the sky. I wasn't about to wait and see what this guy was doing, or what his intentions were, so I slowly eased my way past him towards the Equestrian Center, as quietly as I could, before I felt that I was at a safe enough distance to start sprinting as fast as I could away from this guy. When I reached the first arena of the Equestrian Center, I looked back to the direction of the forest completely out of breath. And there he was. The fucker was standing on the edge of the trail outside of the forest. Just standing there, facing me. I was too far away to see his face, and frankly, I didn't want to. I couldn't make out features. All I could see was his silhouette illuminated by the moonlight peeking through the forest trail. I continued to run with no intention of stopping until I found someone. I had never been so happy to see my nagging neighbor Penny and her moody mare Jolene riding in the Milano area. She noticed my distress, but due to her already harsh opinions of me, I had told her I had been on an endurance run and was just very out of breath and tired. I wanted to avoid any small town gossip as much as I could. My mother arrived with impeccable timing. During the ride home, I broke down in a state of paranoia, distress and panicked at what I had seen and witnessed. My mother didn't know exactly what to make of it, so she recommended I file a police report with the local PD. About an hour after getting home, an officer shows up to take my statement. Following up the next day, the same officer claims to have went and checked out the area, but didn't find anyone or anything out of the blue, apart from partials of bare footprints. But there's nothing incriminating or suspicious about someone going for a walk without shoes. He played it off as a joke and accused me of being under the influence, but I can assure you I was completely sober. Nothing ever came out of this. I attended weekly therapy sessions for almost 2 years following this event, and never went on walks by myself ever again. I had night terrors about the man and still do. I still don't know what to make of it. I don't know if I ever will. This started happening a few weeks ago and kinda has me spooked. We live out in the exact definition of the middle of nowhere. One house on a bunch of land. The closest thing to a town is 15 miles away. Our closest neighbor is 3 miles away. My wife and I love it out here because we are right in nature. I enjoy the quiet so I can work on my art, and she does some graphic design stuff freelance. A few nights ago, we were in the living room around 9 p.m. It's been warm out, so we have been leaving the windows open to enjoy the cool air at night. I was working on some sketches for a new sculpture I planned to do, and she was reading. Out of nowhere, we both smelled cigarette smoke. I've never smoked, and the wife quit about 8 years ago. Plus, she was inside with me, so it couldn't have been her. Our neighbors don't smoke either. It smelled like it was right in the room with us, it was so strong. We thought it was odd, but it didn't seem like anything to be worried about. Next night, around the same time, it happened again. Now it started to bother us. Was someone outside our house smoking? And if so, who was it? Our house is laid out that the living room is on the second floor, and our bedroom is right below it in a half basement. So our bedroom windows are at ground level, and our living room windows are off the ground. If anything, we were worried someone was snooping around our bedroom window. I went outside to look with a flashlight, but even then I didn't see anything. The next day I went to take a better look in the sunlight. Sure enough, I found 2 crushed out cigarette butts a little ways from the bedroom window in some grass. This was alarming to say the least. I took out my trail cam and put it up out there to see if I could get a look at what was going on at night. It didn't really work. Whoever was out there stayed low, and all we caught was the glow of their cigarette. I filed a police report, but they didn't do anything about it since there's only 4 of them and they cover the whole county. They couldn't spare anyone for someone smoking on our property. It kept on for a couple more nights. Then the whispering began. I don't think they were trying to talk to us. It sounded like they were talking to themselves, and now we could hear the crunch of gravel under their foot as they walked beneath the window. I installed some motion detecting floodlights, and they seem to have backed off. But the smell of smoke continues every night. When I go out there to confront them, they're already gone. I really don't know what else to do, and the wife is getting worried that soon they may try to get in. Any suggestions?